Robert Wilson was a typical representative of the golden youth, with his good apartments, expensive car, fashionable haircut and branded outfit. But every time he came to work, there was a complete transformation into an ordinary man, and from all of the above remained only a haircut, and that was often hidden under a doctor's hat. Robert Wilson was the head of the children's department at a large multi-speciality hospital. His choice of profession came as a shock to his wealthy parents. Given his not-so-calm and exemplary youth, they found his decision rather strange. Nevertheless, they reasoned it was acceptable. For a year, they observed Robert diligently studying his textbooks. They were expecting him to lose interest in difficult studying quickly, but Robert proved them wrong. He successfully completed the first course and went on vacation to visit his uncle abroad. When he returned, his eyes were shining with excitement. "Dad, you can't imagine the level of medicine there. My uncle arranged it, and I spent a few days in the children's ward. It was incredible. Someday I aspire to become a super doctor just like them." Robert's parents exchanged surprising glances once again. Could a person change so drastically in a single moment? Mr. Wilson spoke up, making a promise. "If you make it through the second year, I'll send you to study abroad. You deserve the best education, sonny." And he had to keep his word and send his son to medical school abroad. Robert returned with a diploma, 1,000 ideas, and a burning desire to cure all of the children in the world. During a celebratory dinner, where several potential brides were invited, under the pretense of being the family friends, children, Mr. Wilson said to his son, "Robert, I respect your choice, and I am thrilled that a doctor has joined our family. However, you must understand that working in a state hospital is not the best way for you." Robert, who was busy talking to one of the girls, stared at his father with interest. "It's really interesting to hear. Why is that?" "Well, firstly, you won't earn much there. Secondly, why bother with all those children? They come from all sorts of dysfunctional families. Any normal parent would take their child to a regular hospital." Robert grinned and replied, "Dad, I want to work in an ordinary hospital. Firstly, it allows for diverse professional development. Secondly, the children are not to blame for their parents' circumstances." For the first time, Mr. Wilson did not insist on his own opinion, and Robert chuckled as he watched the interest fade from the eyes of the invited girls. For nearly 2 years, Robert dedicated himself to his work. He was on the front line, mainly in the emergency room, where he encountered a multitude of children with various conditions. The head doctor of the hospital once told him, "Until you learn not to let hurt overwhelm you, you will not become a good doctor. A doctor must have a clear mind to make accurate diagnoses." Robert now understood the wisdom in those words. Initially, he would feel like crying every time a seriously ill child was brought in. However, he managed to gather himself, realizing that he needed to provide the necessary care and treatment. While he still felt pain, he never let his emotions hinder his work. And 3 months ago, he received a summons from the chief doctor. "Please have a seat, Dr. Wilson." Robert sat down, aware that the head doctor was known for being fair but rather strict. It was not uncommon for someone who entered his office expecting praise to leave without a job. Robert tried to recall any mistakes he might have made, but nothing came to mind. "Dr. Wilson, do you like working at our hospital?" "Everything is fine, Dr. Flannery. I enjoy my work, and everything suits me." The head doctor grinned. "You're the first person I've heard say that recently. Usually everyone has complaints. Some are unhappy with their paycheck, others with their schedule." "I have no complaints." "I have heard about your achievements and your willingness to take on extra duties. It has been very impressive. You know, when I hired you, I was certain you wouldn't last a month. I even made a bet with one of the supervisors, and I lost. And now I have a problem. Your department head is retiring, and we need someone who can not only manage the department, but also be an exceptional doctor. I have carefully considered all the candidates, and I am convinced that no one but you are suitable for this role." To be honest, Robert felt a bit overwhelmed. Becoming the head of the department at the age of 30 was an unexpected honour. However, he didn't consider himself the best among his colleagues. There were doctors who performed better than him and had more experience. "I've already signed your assignment, so come straight to your office tomorrow and we'll change the sign today." Not much time has passed since then. It seemed to Robert that he had always been the head here. At first, his father tried to transfer him to a private clinic. But when Robert became the head, Mr. Wilson relaxed and said, "Okay, tell me what you want there. I'll sponsor your department." Robert hugged his father tightly and replied, "Dad, honestly, I need everything, but I'll be happy to help in any way." The department quickly became exemplary, the best in the city. Even the wealthy parents were now considering whether to take their child to a private clinic or to Robert's department. However, there was nothing to be surprised about. Robert's father was a man of his word, and soon the department had not only new equipment, but also a good repair and even a huge plasma screen in the game room. It was spring outside. Robert jumped out of the house early, thinking once again that his mother's morning calls were as invigorating as a cold shower. The mother's song was an old one. "Dear Sonny, you're already over 30 and you're still not married." Then there were long lists of those who already had grandchildren, then those who had children, and for dessert, those who had at least found their soulmates. Robert had neither the first, nor the second, nor the third, and Mrs. Wilson wondered what was wrong with her son. Robert couldn't tell his mother that he was sick of these conversations, so he listened patiently, sometimes giving some signs of careful attention. Robert had girlfriends, but whenever the relationship went further than just a few nights together, they, for some reason, started making plans for him to quit the hospital and open his own private clinic. Robert sincerely didn't understand why he would do that. He loved his job and did not want to change it for something else. After such conversations, mutual understanding immediately ended, and the girl's phone number was deleted from Robert's phone. Only once did the man have a problem with his girlfriend. Jagwiga was a very bright and spectacular brunette, spoiled by male attention, who knew exactly what she wanted from life. At that moment she wanted to be Robert's wife. When he realized that Jagwiga was slowly but surely moving her things into his place, he immediately broke up with her. But the girl did not calm down. Robert never realized when she managed to make spare keys, but a week later when he came home, he found Jagwiga meeting him completely undressed. Robert was furious. He was going to watch a soccer game on TV in the evening, but instead he had to get rid of this annoying woman and change the lock on the front door. Robert parked his car in the hospital parking lot. There weren't many cars. He was always one of the first to arrive. "Dr. Wilson!" Robert heard a voice behind him and turned around. Not far from the car stood the head doctor. "I see you're an early bird and like to come early?" Robert really preferred to come in advance. Before going on rounds, he always asked the nurses what happened during the night, which of the children did not sleep well, who ate badly for dinner, who cried and asked for their mother. The nurses in his department were wonderful, and if there were anyone who was not interested in how the child slept at night, they immediately left his department. "Good morning, Dr. Flannery. The early bird catches the worm," Robert laughed. "Yeah, I know. By the way, God himself sent you to me. I have a request for you. Yesterday my friend called me and asked me to help his niece. She came from some backwoods and has been studying to be a doctor for 4 years, and, as you understand, she's a pediatrician. The friend says that the girl is intelligent, studies seriously, not just for show, and she really wants to be independent. Her uncle tries to help her financially, of course, but she refuses any assistance. The only thing she asked her uncle to do during this time is to find her a part-time job somewhere. until the end of the school year on weekends, but also during the summer on any schedule. I thought maybe you could find a place for her in your department." "Dr. Flannery, you know that my department is filled with young nurses. Spring has started, everyone wants time off, and there's no one to replace them. Send that niece to me and we'll talk. I think it'll work out." "Thank you so much for that. This friend is very dear to me. We've been friends since we were kids. I can't say no to him. It's my solemn duty to help." "Don't worry. If this girl is responsible for her work, then I will be happy to take her in." Robert walked around his department, peering into the wards of those who had just been admitted just yesterday. He comforted a whimpering girl who was there for the third time and still couldn't get used to being without her mother. Then he returned to his office to prepare for his rounds. Almost immediately there was a knock on the door. "Yes, come in." A marvellous creature appeared in the office, as he could not find any other words to describe. A petite girl entered, but that wasn't the main thing. She had fiery braided hair, and with her bright green eyes and plump, tantalizing lips, she was simply stunning. "Hello, Dr. Flannery spoke about me with you," the girl said, blushing deeply. Robert looked at her with surprised eyes, and he even momentarily forgot what to say. After coughing a couple of times to gather his thoughts, he finally spoke. Yeah, we spoke to him this morning. I didn't realize you were so quick." The girl smiled, revealing a row of white teeth for a moment. "I live not far from here." Robert felt like tapping himself on the forehead. What an idiot! He knew that the girl lived in a dormitory of the medical school, and it was just a few buildings away from the hospital. Robert glanced at his watch. "Well, I have rounds now. If you'd like, you can come with me, and then we can talk about work." "Oh, I'd love to." "What's your name?" Robert asked with a smile as he watched the girl retrieve a robe from her bag and begin buttoning it up. She paused, raised her head, and suddenly burst into laughter. "Oh, I'm sorry. I always forget to introduce myself. My name is Charlotte." "And my name is Dr. Robert Wilson." He examined sick kids, gave orders, and talked to boys and girls. By the end of the rounds, Charlotte looked at him in complete admiration. When they returned to the office, the girl exhaled. "I will surely become as good a doctor as you." "Do you think I'm a good doctor?" "Of course. Do you think I asked to have a job at your department for nothing?" "No. 6 months ago, you treated a girl. She's our neighbour from the village. Her parents suffered so much because of her weak health. She came to you with one disease, but you noticed the real problem. She's so active now. When my mother calls me, she tells me that the girl's mum's really shocked now. They were used to her hardly being able to get up, and she was apathetic about everything." "You're talking about Claire, aren't you?" Robert remembered this girl who had suffered because of her parents' lack of brains. For some reason, they decided that the child should drink all sorts of herbs, thinking they contained necessary vitamins, and for several months they poisoned the child with infusions that her body couldn't bear. Robert rarely lost his temper, but his patience came to an end. He invited the parents into the office, closed the door tightly, and expressed his feelings. He not only scolded them, but also showed them the possible consequences of such vitamins for the child. He had certainly cured Claire, and it seemed that the parents were cured too, as the girl was feeling fine now. "Right, that's Claire. It's wonderful how small the world is. Claire's mum said you had literally shaken her up. She looks at everything differently now. So you're also a healer of adults." Robert laughed. "Well, you could say that too. Have a seat. I'll invite the head nurse over and we'll see how we can schedule you." Hannah was a burly, loud-voiced and professional specialist. When she appeared, the nurses immediately straightened up, but her face changed unimaginably when she saw a child in front of her. In that case, she spoke softly, and her hands were as soft as down. Any child who entered her field of vision immediately stopped crying. At first, Robert treated the head nurse warily and noticed how scared the nurses were of her. He thought that such relationships interfered with their work. But then, one day, a boy was brought to them by ambulance. He had fallen from a playhouse in the garden and appeared to have broken his leg. He was screaming in pain and wouldn't let anyone near him. His frantic movements made them fear he might injure himself further. His mother was on her way, but due to traffic, she wouldn't arrive for another 30 minutes. She was on the phone with the teacher, who was trying to comfort the boy and connect him with his mother. For about 5 minutes, the emergency room was filled with the boy's piercing screams, attracting the attention of almost half the hospital. Then Hannah arrived, and everyone parted ways to make way for her. The boy fell silent for a brief moment to catch his breath, and it was at that moment that she started speaking to him. After that, he never became hysterical again, and even allowed Hannah to administer a shot. 5 minutes later, the medication took effect, and they were finally able to begin the examination. Later, Robert found Hannah sitting in her office gazing out the window. When he entered, she stood up. "Shall I write an application for dismissal?" she asked. Robert was taken aback at first, but then he realized that she simply understood everything, his thoughts, his dissatisfaction. Before approaching her, Robert glanced at her file. 15 years of working with children. That was quite impressive. "Hannah, I've come to ask for forgiveness. You are the best pediatric nurse, and I would be delighted if we could become friends." For the first time in their entire time working together, Robert saw tears glistening in Hannah's eyes. From that moment on, they became true friends. Gradually, Robert realized that Hannah's expertise extended beyond caring for children. She was a top specialist in her field, maintaining impeccable organization in both paperwork and medications. And now, when Hannah learned why Robert called her, she couldn't contain her excitement. "God heard my prayers. We really need one more nurse." She shifted her gaze to Charlotte. "And you, as I understand it, want to work for us. Can you tell us a little about yourself?" Charlotte shook her head. "My name is Charlotte. I'm in medical school now, and I want to get some experience in my favourite field. That's why I'm here. My priority is to become a doctor, and that's it." Robert looked at her in surprise. She spoke just like him, a dedicated bachelor and a doctor to the core. Charlotte got to work, and Hannah faithfully reported on the new nurse's progress. At first, Robert didn't understand why, but then he realized that the head nurse believed Charlotte to be his protégée. So he decided to clear things up at once and entered her room. "Hannah, am I interrupting you?" "No, Dr. Wilson, come in." "If you offer me tea or coffee, I would be deeply grateful." The woman smiled and asked, "Do you mind cocoa? It's the only thing I drink. I always prepare it fresh for work and then put it in a thermos." "Cocoa? I haven't had that in ages. I'm all for it." As the cocoa was poured into mugs and a plate of sandwiches magically appeared before Robert, he began to speak. "Hannah, I believe that there has been a misunderstanding between us. Charlotte has nothing to do with me. She is the niece of a friend of the chief physician, so you may not report all her actions to me. She's all yours. You can discipline her or praise her without any doubt." "Dr. Wilson, oh, come on. Did you truly think there was something happening in our department that I didn't know about? Of course, I'm aware of Charlotte's background, how she came from the village to our city and how determined she is. I can say to you even more. I see that you like her." "What? Charlotte? Me? No, Hannah, you're mistaken. She is totally not in my taste." Hannah laughed again. "So, Dr. Wilson, it seems you don't even know your own preferences. Thin and tall girls are in fashion. So, you think you like them? It's like shoes, you know. You always love and wear what's in fashion, but at home, it's a great pleasure to put on your favourite slippers." Robert wondered. In some ways, of course, the head nurse was right, but not when it came to Charlotte. He didn't like the girl at all. Or, no, it didn't matter. She wasn't his type, and that was that. But Hannah probably jinxed them. No other way. Robert started to see Charlotte everywhere. Of course, he had seen her before, but now he couldn't stop looking at her. He unhappily noted that she had the kind of figure that most girls dream of, and her eyes. Whenever he met her gaze, he felt embarrassed for some reason and quickly looked away, afraid to look at her lips and embarrassed by his own thoughts. Charlotte had been working for 2 months already, and she had quickly become friends with all the nurses. Robert had never heard Hannah raise her voice at Charlotte. He knew very well that even the chief physician was afraid of the head nurse, so it wasn't just because the girl was recommended by him. Apparently, she was really good at her job. One summer day, when half of the doctors were on vacation, Robert was on night duty. He happened to be paired with Charlotte. He couldn't tell whether he was happy or sad, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. After the evening rounds, Charlotte came running to him. "Dr. Wilson, you're needed in the waiting room. There's a girl in critical condition." He immediately followed her. In the emergency room, there was a girl who looked unnaturally pale. Not only was she constantly crying, but she was also vomiting. Her mother was by her side, talking non-stop. "What a girl! She is always causing trouble, never paying attention, always up to something." The girl looked at her mother with teary eyes. "That's not true. I didn't do anything. It's—" The woman pushed her away. "Shut up, you miserable girl. You're nothing but trouble." It was the first time Robert had ever seen a child treated like that. Usually when a mother brought in her child, she would be more frightened than the child. And, if it was something serious, more than once he had seen mothers faint right in the waiting room, unable to bear the shock. "Please, stop talking like this. You're making the child nervous." Robert said it firmly. The woman gave him a hateful look. "She ate some junk. Just wash her stomach and then we're going home." "Whether she goes home or not is up to me." Robert shifted his gaze to the girl. She looked at her mother in horror, as if she had seen a ghost. Charlotte lightly touched his hand. "Robert, can I talk to you for a moment?" He had already finished examining the girl and nodded. They left the room. The girl was crying, and when her mother couldn't hear, she asked me not to give her back to her. According to the paperwork, the woman is not her biological mother. She's a foster parent. There's a man waiting for them outside who doesn't look like a good person. Robert glanced out the window before returning to his office. Yes, there was indeed a man standing there smoking, but he was facing away and Robert couldn't see his face. "Okay, we'll figure it out later," the doctor said, returning to mother and daughter. "Well, I have bad news. We're going to keep the girl hospitalized until we find out what her body is reacting to. She'll have to stay in the hospital until all the tests according to the protocol are done." "No, she's not staying here. She's going home." "Listen to me, please, one more time. Your child needs to spend a few days in the hospital. Don't you care about how she feels?" "She's faking it. She's capable of anything. I know her. Come on, Yvonne. Get up. We're going home." Robert intercepted the woman's hand, which she was using to pull the girls after herself. "Please, calm down. If you refuse treatment for the child, I'll have to involve the police and Child Protective Services. You don't want to leave her in a life-threatening condition, do you? You're her foster parents, if I'm not mistaken, right?" It seemed to Robert that the woman was about to throw punches at him, but she held back. As she was leaving the office, she hissed, "You'll regret this. I'll find a control for you." When she left, the girl looked at him and whispered, "Thank you," before bursting into tears. Robert turned to Charlotte. "Put her in a ward. Conduct all the necessary tests. I'll be there in half an hour." "All right, Dr. Wilson." Then Robert called the head doctor and informed him about the incidents. "You see, Dr. Flannery, I'm warning you. I have a feeling that this girl's mother will run to complain to higher authorities." "Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Don't worry, I can handle them. Do what you think is best." Robert filled out the paperwork. The girl turned out to be 8 years old, although she didn't look more than 6. Well, now he should examine her more closely. He entered her ward quietly. It was dark outside, and for some reason the light was not on in the room. Robert reached for the switch and froze. Charlotte was sitting on Yvonne's bed. She held the girl's hand. They were talking, or rather, Yvonne was talking, and Charlotte listened and only sometimes asked questions. The little girl was crying. Not everything was possible to make out, but in general, Robert understood what she was saying. "Please, don't send me back. I don't want to go any more. I can't. Dad always beats us up if we do something wrong. We come from school and they send us straight to the greenhouses, then to the stable. They have a big farm and only the 4 of us work there. Do you know what they feed us? Mother brings old bread and potatoes. Sometimes we even have to drink spoiled milk. I try not to eat at home, only at school. They feed us there for free. But yesterday Dad got drunk. He made us eat yogurt with mould on it. I immediately felt sick, and then he hit me in the stomach, so I fell, and I felt worse and worse. And in the morning, he insisted that I be taken to the hospital because he was scared, even though Mum said it would go away anyway." Charlotte asked, "So you're not alone there?" "No, they have 3 more foster kids and all girls. Only they're 10 and 11 and I'm the youngest. I don't know why they took me in. I can't even lift a bucket of water yet." Robert's hair stood on end in shock. He had heard stories like this before, of course, but now he was faced with them. He finally flicked the light switch. "Are you girls going to sit in the dark all the time?" Charlotte smiled and said, "No, we were just waiting for you. We got carried away and forgot." She stood up, began to get Yvonne ready for examination, and suddenly froze. Then she looked up at Robert with confusion in her eyes. He shifted his gaze to the girl's abdomen. There was a clear boot print. He said nothing and continued to examine the girl. In addition to the print, he found many bruises, and the girl was very thin. Half an hour later, Dr. Flannery was already sitting in his office. He was so furious that he even took a sedative. "My granddaughter is 8 years old. I would kill anyone who even just laid a hand on her. And here is this. I've already called the police. They should be here any minute." It took another 2 hours to talk to the policeman, then to the woman from the guardianship authorities to write a report and to obtain permission to remove the children. When the woman from the guardianship authorities and the policeman were about to drive to that village, she suddenly stopped. "I'm going to bring other children to you. They need to be examined too." "Of course, we'll handle everything properly." Charlotte and Robert sat down in his office and drank coffee. Charlotte thoughtfully said, "I do not understand why they need such a big farm if they cannot cope by themselves." "Oh, Charlotte, I think it's pretty clear. If there were no foster children, there would be no farm. It's all about profit. Not only do the children work day and night, but the state pays well for it. And they're not their own. There's no need to feel sorry for them." "But how can that be? If they're orphans, they should be even more pitied." "Well, Charlotte, you think that way because you're a human being, and they are not. Not human beings." The police and the woman from the guardianship office returned 5 hours later. The woman kept saying, "This was horrifying. It was a real horror." And then it turned out that, at first, the police were not allowed in. Then, when almost the whole village gathered at the gate, the head of the family, who had previously been convicted of crimes, started shooting back. Fortunately, he was disarmed with no casualties or injuries and is now at the station. It turns out that these are not the first foster children. 2 girls whom they took when they were older ran away from them as soon as they became adults. They have been tracked down, and they have also testified. It also came out that there was a man in the guardianship who was willing to give a child to anyone for money. Dr. Flannery often came to Robert to find out how his new patients felt and to inform him about the progress of the investigation. Charlotte was also included in their conversations, as she was a direct witness to what was happening. Lately, Charlotte had been spending all her spare time in Yvonne's ward. Robert even saw her a few times when she had a day off. Charlotte also bought plenty of books and a big stuffed hare for Yvonne. Robert stopped reassuring himself that he did not like Charlotte at all. He liked her so much that his breath was taken away. Recently, Charlotte came to his office and asked, "Dr. Wilson, will Yvonne be discharged soon?" "Well, I think next week." Charlotte sat down. "I need your help." Robert was honestly scared. "Charlotte, is something wrong?" "I don't even know how to tell you. You see, I can't leave Yvonne, I just can't. You can't imagine how good and smart she is. Well, I want to adopt her, but I found out that I don't have my own place to live, and most importantly, I don't have a husband. I wanted to ask, maybe you have more experience? What should I do? Is there a website where I can find a pretend husband? I really don't know what to do." Charlotte started crying, and Robert looked at her, and he couldn't understand how he hadn't noticed before what a big heart she had. The man sat down next to her. "Charlotte, let's go to a restaurant after work. We need to distract ourselves, and then the solution will come to us. You'll see." The young nurse looked at him in amazement and then nodded. "Okay, I agree." By the end of the evening, Robert realized one truth. He had completely fallen in love. The next day, he had the day off. He went to his parents' house in the morning because he needed someone to talk to, and of course, no one understood him better than his parents. His mum immediately started setting the table and kept hugging him all the time. "Robert, you've become such a man, and it's so long since you've visited us." His father looked at him with satisfaction. He would secretly call the chief doctor to talk to him and ask about his son's work. Dr. Flannery always said that they had never had a better specialist, so the father was proud of Robert, but he couldn't show it. When the family sat down at the table, Robert's father asked what was new at work, and Robert told him what had happened. Mrs. Wilson couldn't even eat. She was so upset. "We have to buy something for those girls, especially Yvonne. We have to do something about it, and Charlotte is such a smart girl. Father, can't you use your connections to help Charlotte adopt Yvonne?" But the father did not answer. He looked attentively at his son. "Robert, I take it that's not all you wanted to tell us?" "No, not everything, Dad, you're right. I love Charlotte and I want to propose to her. I know it's not customary in our circles, but it's my life, and I came today so that there won't be any misunderstandings between us later. I'm going to propose anyway." There was silence at the table for a while. It was always his father who made decisions in the house, so his mother looked at him. They lived in circles where their son's actions might not be understood, so she waited for his response. Finally, the man looked up and asked his wife, "Dear, why are you sitting? Please, bring Grandma's ring. How will he propose without it?" The mother quickly stood up and disappeared into the room. Robert knew that there was a special ring in their family, traditionally passed down to daughters or brides. He turned to his father and said, "Dad, thank you for understanding me." Robert rushed off to work, even though it wasn't his shift that day. He couldn't wait any longer. He ran down the corridor, surprising all the staff, and entered Yvonne's room. As he expected, Charlotte was there too, reading a book with a little girl. Both of them looked at him with surprise. Robert did not hear the door open behind him. Hannah came to ask what had happened. "Charlotte, will you marry me? I love you, and I promise to be a good father to Yvonne." The head nurse smiled quietly and closed the door. It worked out exactly as she had planned, she thought to herself. And it didn't matter that she had manipulated the situation a bit by sending Charlotte to Robert for advice, and telling her that he certainly knew how to solve that problem. Charlotte stood up, bewildered. "What did you say? How can we get married? How can you love me? Did Hannah tell you everything?" Robert asked. "Tell me what?" "But I only told her." The girl realized that she had said too much and fell silent, feeling embarrassed. Then Yvonne, with a smile, spoke up. "Dr. Wilson, Charlotte told Hannah that she liked you very much. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything." Charlotte became angry and ashamed, while Robert smiled. "Well, it seems like everything is falling into place. Charlotte, this is the ring that has been passed down in our family's female line. Tomorrow, we're going to the registry office, and then to meet my parents. You need to have this ring with you. Otherwise, I'll have problems with my mum." Charlotte shyly held out her hand, and Robert placed the ring on her finger. The woman from the guardianship office had been a great help to them. After the wedding, she quickly arranged all the necessary procedures to adopt Yvonne. "Here, Yvonne, congratulations on your new mum and dad. And to you, my dears, on your wonderful little girl." She handed Charlotte a folder with Yvonne's documents. Yvonne threw herself into Charlotte and Robert's arms, embracing them tightly. Life continued, but it took a new turn, reaching a more happy level, so to speak.